Happy Monday, everyone. I'm Cassie Carlson. It is Super Bowl week, and we are starting off the show by talking Bears with the Chicago Tribune's Bears and NFL columnist Brad Biggs. And Brad, I'm used to seeing you on a Monday morning on the first flight out of whatever airport we're flying out from the Bears games, but it's good to see you on Zoom. We were just talking, like, no true offseason this year because of the season going so deep into the year.
Yeah, I looked at the calendar the other day and I said, oh my goodness, it's almost February. And of course, now we're into February and it feels like the Bears season ended just a few days ago, an exciting run for them that is going to carry into a busy offseason at Hallis Hall.
Yeah, well, and the good problem, too, is when you win games, everyone wants to pluck from your coaching staff. And Ben Johnson said at his end-of-season presser that he saw future head coaches on his staff. And then you see Declan Doyle take the Ravens offensive coordinator position. I thought he would maybe stay for another season just to be under Ben Johnson for another year and learn from him, especially after he withdrew from the Eagles job. But now he's going to be paired with Lamar Jackson, two 29-year-olds. Are you surprised by this move?
A little bit surprised because in talking to people in Mobile last week, the feeling was that even after Baltimore had put in a request to interview Declan, that the vibe at Hallis Hall was they felt pretty confident that he would return. But the Ravens and that new coaching staff with Jesse Minter probably made a really good sales pitch. Hey, we'll pair you up with Lamar Jackson. We've got a future Hall of Fame running back in Derrick Henry. Why don't you take your shot here? And I'm guessing that Declan evaluated it and said, for a first time play calling opportunity, it might not get a whole lot better for me than this. And so he jumped at it. And there were other teams that had kind of poked around, and the reply they had got was that Declan was likely to stay put with the Bears, but now Ben Johnson's in the market for an offensive coordinator. And when you have sharp offensive minds, because that offensive coordinator role is the most proven path to becoming a head coach, people are going to come for him. And Sean McVay has lost 4 offensive coordinators in 9 years to head coaching opportunities. If the Bears can really get this thing cooking, it could be a path for assistant coaches to come through.
When you think Ben Johnson now having to look for a replacement for Declan Doyle, do you think he goes internal, or do you think he's looking to bring someone else in to kind of play off one another as he continues to grow his tree?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think he'll probably be a little deliberate, and he's had some time to think about what he would want to do in the event that someone did hire Declan. He's got a couple internal candidates in Press Taylor, who's been an offensive coordinator previously in Jacksonville. Obviously, Antoine Randall, the receivers coach, who also has the title of assistant head coach, could be a guy in the mix. Randall was a guy who 3.5, 4 hours before kickoff would be out on the field before almost every game with a call sheet. And it's something Declan Doyle has done since he first got into coaching. And he would put together a call sheet and go out on the field hours before kickoff and kind of visualize, okay, 1st and 10 at the 32-yard line, what's my call? And walk through it. And it was 20, 25, 30 minutes. And Randall L. was doing it as well, kind of preparing for a play calling opportunity. So obviously he aspires for bigger things than just being a receivers coach and assistant head coach. The opportunity to call the plays isn't going to be there with the Bears, but those are 2 internal candidates for sure. And then obviously JT Barrett, the quarterback's coach, I'd be a little surprised if he leapfrogged Press and Antoine, but he's another guy that's a young coach that has an opportunity to rise in the system.
Yeah, and if there's anything we learned from Ben Johnson last year is he just doesn't go out there and hire his friends. So it could be someone external as well. Ian Cunningham finally gets a GM job. He's interviewed the last 3 years. He goes to Atlanta. But because of Matt Ryan being president of football, where he's considered the primary football decision maker, Cunningham's role does not qualify for the Bears to get those 3rd-round compensatory picks. And I know Bears fans are outraged by this, thinking that he would finally get his gig, they would get the 3rd-round picks, but it's all in the wording of the Rooney Rule. Do you think the league takes a look at this moving forward because of this situation?
Yeah, it's possible. It's just a kind of an odd thing because not every team has the same flow chart, okay, through the top of the organization on the football side. And in Atlanta, they added that new title with Matt Ryan for president of football. And people say, well, the Bears have a president, and they do in Kevin Warren. But the Falcons also have a president and CEO. So it's kind of an additional layer of management, and the league and the teams have to decide, okay, this is the primary football executive for this organization. In Chicago, that person is Ryan Poles. In Atlanta, it's deemed that Matt Ryan is that guy. But in the spirit of the rule, with what the league is trying to achieve, you would think the Bears would earn a couple of compensatory draft picks here at the end of round 3 this year and next year. But unless something dramatically shifts, that will not be the case. Good for Ian, though. They've got some young talent on that Falcons roster. He was raised for a while in the Atlanta area, was a Falcons fan when he was younger, had been looking for the right opportunity, wasn't going to jump at any opportunity, turned down the Arizona Cardinals job a couple years back, and Atlanta's the right one for him. And so it'll be interesting to see what he does with that Falcons team.
Yeah, they got two-time Coach of the Year, Kevin Stefanski. Last year, we were talking about the timing of Matt Eberflus being fired because he spoke on the Zoom after the Lions game, and then just hours later, he was let go for the first time midseason as the Bears fired a head coach. Now you're looking at the Vikings firing their GM, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, who spent the week at the Senior Bowl. Were you surprised by this move, and did you happen to see him around there at all in Mobile?
Oh, yeah, I saw Kwesi in Mobile. Some with the Vikings contingent of scouts, some of the higher level scouts that they've had for quite a while. And the move is surprising because of the timing, because they waited weeks until after their season had concluded to make it a real kind of deliberate approach by ownership in Minnesota. And now it's such that they're not even going to really get rolling on replacing Kwesi until after the draft. The timing, it's so deep into the offseason now that they'll kind of handle it internally. But they drafted really poorly for the last 4 years. I mean, really unproductive drafts. And I think the thing that has propped them up, and they were above 500 this year, is the work that Kevin O'Connell did with quarterbacks before their struggles this year. And then Brian Flores saying, hey, these are the free agents I need on the defensive side of the ball to make my system one of the best in the league. And with that, they've been able to be highly competitive in the division, but just not a lot of young players in the pipeline in Minnesota. And so Kwesi winds up taking the fall.
Yeah, and hard to see Sam Darnold go to the Super Bowl with a different team just a year later. When you were down in Mobile, you wrote in the Tribune about how much the tone around the Bears has changed because of Ben Johnson. What were some of the most striking things you heard just about what the external feeling is of the Bears?
Well, there's such a high level of respect for Ben as a coach and as a play caller. And people would come up to me, people I've known for decades, and coming up to me and just saying, hey, you see what a difference a coach makes, because of the dramatic turnaround from the poor football that the Bears have been playing over a number of years to being the best team in the division and reaching the final 8. And, interestingly, one guy talked about Ben's play calling specifically and how he's so advanced that he can set up defenses with and he used the analogy of like a boxer with a jab, another jab, a jab. And then before you know it, well, here comes the uppercut. And he's just kind of sequencing his play calling at such a high level that he can keep defensive players and defensive coordinators on their heels throughout a ball game.
Why is it different from 2018 coming off of Matt Nagy's first year as head coach? Is it the quarterback that just the ceiling is that much higher?
Yeah, I think the quarterback, because you looked at Mitch Trubisky and the offense as a whole after that 2018 season, and it just, like, offensively, their numbers in the second half of that regular season weren't great. You had questions about Mitch, and I think everybody feels like it's arrow up with Caleb Williams. And there's a collection of young talent on that offensive side of the ball. If you look at players who are going to be going into year 4 or younger on offense, if you count Ozzie Trapillo, and I think the evaluation still needs to be done on him, both as a player and then health wise, but if you include him, you're looking at 7 players on that offensive side of the ball that'll be year 4 or younger. And this is before the draft, that look like starters. And Kyle Monungai, the running back, I'd put in that group, even though that's kind of a shared role. Darnell Wright, the right tackle, due for a contract extension probably later this offseason. Everybody knows about Colston Loveland, Roma Dunze, Luther Burden III. There's just an enormous amount of offensive talent there on that side of the ball for Ben Johnson. And so that sets it apart. I think Dennis Allen did really a terrific job with what he had to work with and deal with. The injuries that the Bears had were mostly localized to the defense, and the job he did week in and week out, it wasn't perfect every week. Some weeks it struggled, like San Francisco, but hats off to him. And you look back to 18, the Bears had one of the best guys in the NFL running the defense in Vic Fangio. Of course, he left that offseason to become the head coach in Denver. Dennis Allen's not going anywhere this offseason.
Yeah, you mentioned the injuries on the defense, and Ryan Poles made sure to point out losing Dio Dangbo for the year, losing Shamar Turner. Both of those guys going to be back next year, which provides some depth on the defensive line. But I think you're still looking at just how this team is built and those premium positions, and you need an edge rusher probably opposite of Montez Sweat. So being down in Mobile for the week and knowing the Bears have the 25th draft pick, what position groups do you feel like have depth that could align with where they're picking?
I think it's a really good draft for the defensive line as a whole. And I think the Bears are going to look to get better on that line. And I don't know that I would necessarily place an order of edge rusher over defensive tackle or vice versa. I think they're looking for the most impactful young player that they can get in the building, and an opportunity to really probably draft a couple linemen to add to the mix. You don't know how Dio and Shamar will come back. You're pretty confident that they'll be in good shape, but just adding strength to that group as a whole, which struggled against the run at times, didn't mount a consistent pass rush. I want to say sacks per pass attempt. The defense was 21st in the National Football League. So they're looking to get better across the board on that defensive line. There were a bunch of players in Mobile that were impressive. Clemson's TJ Parker, Missouri's Zion Young, a pair of defensive ends. On the interior, Caleb Banks of Florida, Lee Hunter of Texas Tech, a couple names that jumped out, and not all the players were in Mobile, right? So this is a really good draft for defensive linemen, and that's good for the Bears because it aligns with, I think, what their needs are and what some of their wants will be looking ahead to late April.
We know that free agency comes first, and they have way more cap constraints than the past years. Seeing a lot about Tremaine Edmunds being a potential cap casualty because it would create $15 million in cap space. Do you think that is a strong likelihood, and there are going to be some stars that we don't see on this roster because of those constraints?
Yeah, I think this situation with Tremaine's going to warrant a real close inspection by the Bears when they get back together. I think the coaching staff's off until after the Super Bowl, and then they've got to have some internal meetings where they're evaluating what they had on the field in 2025, what it looks like going forward. Tremaine was having a marvelous season before the groin injury in mid-November at Minnesota at the end of that game. And you could see the impact that he had on the defense. And he was playing the best football he had since the Bears had signed him in 2023. But I think when you look at the contract, you understand that there's no guaranteed money remaining in the deal, and you consider the flexibility that they could have with those $15 million. That's a move that would not surprise me. It's probably going to be some type of combination of a cut or cuts, multiple, along with some contract restructuring for some veterans in order to give them the kind of flexibility that they desire moving into the new league year and free agency and looking ahead. But Tremaine's still young. I think he's going to be 28. He's played a ton of football. And I'll say this, Cassie, that's a move that I would expect sooner rather than later in the offseason. If they are going to move on from Tremaine Edmunds, they're going to want to do right by a veteran who's been a good presence in the locker room and give him as much time as possible for him to find a new team. And that's not something that would happen 2 or 3 days before the opening of free agency, in my opinion.
Yeah, there could be a much different looking locker room heading into next year, especially on that defensive side. It is Super Bowl Sunday, Seahawks and Patriots. I got to get your pick, Brad.
Yeah, I'm excited for the possibility of a really good game. I think Seattle's the team you have to pick, considering the gauntlet that the Seahawks went through in the NFC West. Looking at that Patriots schedule, like we've talked about the Patriots since midseason of, well, who have they played? Look at some of these quarterbacks for the other teams that they've beaten. It's crazy to look at the list of teams that New England faced throughout the season that have replaced a coach or fired a coordinator or had a backup quarterback throughout the most of the year. But now that they're here at the Super Bowl, they're in Santa Clara. I think you have to dismiss some of that. Mike Vrabel and his staff do a heck of a job. But I just think the combination of that Seahawks defense with some of the firepower that Seattle has, what Seattle showed in the final about third of the regular season was the ability to run the ball effectively. Now they're down to one running back, Kenneth Walker, but they've done a really nice job. And that's something that you could point out as a negative, I think, earlier in the year for that Seahawks offense. That looks like a complete offense now with Sam Darnold. So I think I would go with Seattle, something like 27-20.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with Seattle. Sam Darnold also hasn't turned the ball over in the postseason and the playoffs yet, which is quite impressive given his track record in the postseason. Brad, I appreciate your time.
Anytime.